All right, hi everybody. So we're going to start our next kind of time period here, talking about a time period which is between like the 1820s, 1830s, to the prelude to the Civil War, which is about 1860 or so. So just kind of give you a time frame there, what we're talking about. So we're going to talk about how women lived and kind of the struggles they went through during this time period. Our objectives to understand the roles and responsibilities of women during the time period and to recognize the success and struggles women faced. Take a look there at the standards, please. And our desired result, what were the roles and responsibilities of women in this period? Two vocab words here. Antebellum. Antebellum is commonly referred to as the pre-Civil War years. Historians disagree on when this actually starts. Some people say it's 1790, some people say it's later. But again, we're talking about pretty much the couple of years, or about maybe 20 or so years leading up to the Civil War in 1860. So again, we're looking at like 1830s, 1840s to about 1860 or so. The Indian Removal Act was in 1830, and this was a law that gave the U.S. government the power to remove Native Americans from southeastern areas to the west. So tiring and tough work. Most women, except those who were wealthy or had some money, during the antebellum period, had difficult lives with tough and tiring work. Girls and women had to bring the water that they needed to cook and clean with in from outside. They didn't have like running water in their sinks like you may have today, or like a bathtub or anything like that. So they had to bring that stuff in from outside, from wherever. It could be close, could be far. They also had to take care of an open fire, which was used for cooking and heating their home. Laundry could also take an entire day to complete as well, and other tasks and work were extremely time-consuming as well. So difficult health. Women were also responsible for taking care of sick family members, and many people worried about poor health conditions because very little was known about disease or illness in the antebellum period. Some medical treatments involved leeching. Leeching involves using leeches, which are these types of insect type parasite creatures that will, attach themselves to your skin and suck your blood. Typically found in like rivers and lakes and things like that. And people believe that if they use these leeches, that the leeches would suck out the sickness or the illness. So that was the idea of leeching. Bloodletting involved making incisions on a person to hopefully allow the illness or disease to kind of leak out or flow out of them. Again, both of these not really efficient, and in most times, these treatments would result in either infection or death of the person because of both of these types of cures. But again, people didn't know much about illness or disease like we do today. People were also not really aware of hygiene or being clean and keeping yourself healthy by eating healthy and things like that, exercise, all those different types of things that doctors tell you today. So people weren't aware of those things, so those things could also be deadly as well. So taking care of children. Farms typically needed a lot of hands to help. So women typically had multiple children. Obviously, we talked as well that many times children did not live to adulthood, so having children to make sure you had enough children to survive hopefully to adulthood was an idea as well. Most women spent a lot of their lives either pregnant or caring for children, but women would welcome a break from childbearing or caring for children duties, such as maybe helping on the farm, or even possibly doing laundry, or helping with the crops, or whatever the case may be. Again, because a lot of their time was consumed by caring for children. However, having a child was also very difficult. We've learned as well that giving birth was dangerous and could result in the death of the child or the mother or both. It was dirty. It was done with very little help. There weren't like a lot of hospitals or necessarily a doctor that you could go to immediately. Maybe a town had one doctor, or maybe the doctor was 2 towns away, and it would take a while for him to get there. So again, very few hospitals, and those that did exist were very extremely dirty and unsanitary. Birth control was also extremely rare. They didn't have the things today that women have available to them for birth control. But by the middle of the 1800s, families began trying to limit how many children they had, especially in the Northeast U.S. because of factories and cities and things like that. But people began to realize, they could maybe try to limit how many children they had. So women in the family. Couples may have wanted a divorce if marriage did not work. However, divorce was very expensive and it was complicated. Not to say it's not today, but especially back in the middle 1800s, it was very complicated and very expensive. Many women would typically stay married to their husbands, even if they were unhappy, just because it was easier than trying to get a divorce. And again, we talked about how if women divorced their husbands, they frequently lost their home or their money or their children. So many women just stayed married, even if they were unhappy. But during the antebellum period, more legal reforms will take place that make divorce easier. So different lives around the country. Women lived different lives based on their race, their location, and their background. During the time period we're talking about, the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, a good opportunity for a young white woman was to marry a well-off man, meaning a man who was wealthy, maybe had a lot of land, maybe he had a good job, and start a family. Very few women had a college education or a paid job. And especially women who lived in the South had fewer opportunities than white women in the North. Many women in the South were poor. They lived in log cabins in southern states. And even those who lived in the West or along the frontier dealt with environmental hardships such as nature and even attacks by Native Americans, basic housing, and even poor facilities. So the lives of slaves. Women who were enslaved had very difficult lives. They could be separated from their husbands and or their children by their masters, and sometimes enslaved women were forced to do things with their masters or forced into difficult situations, and sometimes they had their masters' children. Women in enslaved communities did not face any real discrimination among any other African American men or children because unfortunately they were all slaves and everyone took part in physical work and no one owned property. So in terms of their own kind of group that they were in, they didn't really face any discrimination. But again, being a slave was hard enough. So the lives of Native Americans. Many Native American men, women, and children also face difficult lives. In 1830, sorry, just fixing that there. In 1830, the Indian Removal Act removed Native Americans from the Southeast, places like Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, to the Midwest, like Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, around that area. And this was what was known as the Trail of Tears. In this picture here, many Americans died along the journey. Many of them, obviously had to give up their homes and their locations, which their ancestors had been on for hundreds and thousands of years. So this was obviously a very difficult process. Another result of this is that women in Native American tribes were encouraged by the government to take more of a domestic role. Remember, we talked about how Native American women could sometimes play a role in selecting their leaders or in different councils. But during this time, the government will recommend that Native American women take more of a domestic role, such as caring for children in the home. Now, many Native American women did disagree with this, and it will create some tension between them and Native American men. But despite their opinions, many Native American women lost power once their tribes did move to the West. Alright, so our closure. What were the roles and responsibilities of women in this period? Think about how they lived, what they took care of, how they helped their families or anyone else, and that will hopefully help you answer your questions. Alright, have a great rest of your day or night, and I hope to talk to you soon. Take care, bye-bye.